My name is Emma Reed. I'm 30 years old. And at my younger sister's wedding, my mother told me to stay out of the family photos because I looked too tired to be part of the memory. I had been awake since 4 in the morning, not because I was the maid of honor, not because I was a bridesmaid, because I was the one fixing the seating chart, calling the florist, calming the caterer, steaming my sister's veil, and making sure the wedding she called her perfect day did not collapse before the ceremony even started. My sister Sophie stood in a lace dress that cost more than my first car. My parents smiled like they had created a fairy tale, and I stood near the back door with a clipboard, wrinkled sleeves, sore feet, and a credit card in my purse that had already paid for half the room. They thought I was just helping. They thought I would stay quiet. They thought nobody would ever know who had really kept that wedding standing. Then, during the reception, the venue manager walked into the ballroom holding the final invoice and said, "Ms. Reed, we need your approval before we charge the remaining balance." The room went quiet so fast I could hear the ice shifting in someone's glass. My sister stopped smiling. My mother's face went pale. My father stared at the invoice like it was a snake. And Daniel, my sister's new husband, looked from the venue manager to me and said, "Wait, why would Emma approve the bill?" That was the moment the wedding finally became honest. But before that moment, I had spent 8 months being told I was selfish, dramatic, jealous, difficult, and lucky to be included at all. Sophie was 26. Beautiful in the effortless way people reward before they know anything else about a person. Blonde hair, wide blue eyes, a soft voice that turned sharper when nobody important was listening. My parents called her their sunshine. I was the storm cloud who carried the umbrella. When Sophie got engaged, she called me before she called our parents. For 1 second, I thought it meant something. I thought maybe she wanted her big sister. She screamed into the phone, "Emma, I'm engaged!" I was genuinely happy for her. I was driving home from a client meeting when she called. I pulled into a parking lot and cried because my little sister was getting married. Then she said, "And I need you." Those 4 words should have warned me. I owned a small event planning business called Reed and Rowan Events. I started it 5 years earlier after leaving a hotel management job where I did the work of 3 people and got paid like half of one. My company wasn't famous, but it was mine. I handled small weddings, anniversary parties, retirement dinners, charity brunches. I knew vendors, I knew contracts, I knew what venues charged when they thought a bride was too emotional to read the fine print. Sophie said, "I don't want a planner. I want family. You understand me." What she meant was, she wanted a planner without paying one. I should have said no. Instead, I said, "Of course I'll help," because that was who I had always been in my family. The helpful one, the reliable one, the one who fixed problems and then disappeared from the photos. The first meeting was at my parents' house. Sophie arrived with bridal magazines, a Pinterest board, and Daniel, who looked nervous but kind. My mother, Marlene, had already opened champagne. My father, Richard, said, "We want this to be classy, Em. Nothing cheap looking." I asked about the budget. Everyone went quiet. Then Mom waved her hand and said, "We'll figure that out later. For now, just find options." That was how it started. Not with theft, not with a demand, just with options. By the end of the first month, options had become deposits. And somehow, every deposit had become my responsibility. The first deposit was for the venue. The Everly House was a restored estate outside town. All white columns, glass chandeliers, rose gardens, and a ballroom that looked expensive even before anyone said the price. Sophie fell in love with it instantly. My father asked the venue coordinator, "What do you need to hold the date?" $10,000, she said. Sophie looked at Mom. Mom looked at Dad. Dad looked at me. That was how things happened in my family. Need moved around the room until it landed on me. Dad cleared his throat. "Emma, could you put it on your business card for now? We'll reimburse you after I move some money around. For now." That was the family phrase that ruined more of my life than any direct insult ever had. I asked, "Are you sure?" Mom laughed lightly. "Don't make it weird. We're family." Sophie squeezed my arm. "Please, Em. If we lose this date, I'll be devastated." Daniel said quietly, "We can pick somewhere else." Sophie looked at him like he had suggested getting married in a parking lot, so I paid the deposit. 2 weeks later, the florist needed a payment, then the photographer, then the caterer, then the dress boutique demanded the second installment because Sophie upgraded her gown without telling anyone. Each time, my parents promised repayment was coming. Each time, Sophie said I was saving her day. At first, I kept a spreadsheet: date, vendor, amount, who promised to repay. It made me feel safe, like proof could protect me from people who had never respected proof unless it helped them. By the third month, the total had reached $27,000. When I told my father, he frowned. "Are you sure? That seems high." I turned my laptop toward him. "These are the invoices." He barely looked. "You know weddings have expenses. Don't nickel and dime your sister." Nickel and dime. I had paid for the venue, flowers, photographer, dress installment, and catering deposit. But to my father, asking to be repaid was nickel and diming. My mother said, "Emma, you're doing well. Sophie is just starting her life." I was 30 years old and running a business I built alone. Apparently, my life had already started, which meant it could be used. Sophie changed too. Or maybe the wedding just made her more honest. She stopped saying thank you. She started saying, "Can you call them? Can you fix this? Can you handle it?" Once, when I reminded her I had a client event the same weekend as her bridal shower setup, she said, "Emma, this is my wedding. Your job can wait one day. My job. The one paying for her wedding." I said, "My clients pay me." She rolled her eyes. "You know what I mean." No, I didn't. Or maybe I did, and that was worse. At the bridal shower, I arrived early to set up centerpieces because Sophie said the bridesmaids were bad at details. I stayed late to pack leftover favors. When the photographer took photos, Mom waved me out of the frame. "Emma, honey, can you move? We want the girls." The girls. The bridesmaids wore matching pale blue dresses. I wore black pants and a blouse because I had been told to dress practical. My Aunt Linda noticed. She asked, "Why aren't you in the bridal party?" Before I could answer, Mom said, "Emma is helping in a different way." A different way meant invisible. That night, I sat in my car outside my apartment and looked at my spreadsheet until the numbers blurred. $31,412. I called Dad. He answered on the third ring. "Everything okay?" I said, "I need to know when you're paying me back." He sighed. "Not tonight, Emma." "When?" "We're waiting on some funds." "What funds?" His voice sharpened. "Do you want to help your sister or not?" That was always the trap. If I asked for fairness, I did not love Sophie. If I needed repayment, I was greedy. If I said no, I was ruining the wedding. So I said, "I'm helping, but I'm not a bank." Dad was silent for a moment. Then he said, "Maybe that's why Sophie didn't ask you to be maid of honor. You make everything about money." I hung up before he could hear me cry. The maid of honor was Sophie's college friend, Brianna, a woman who had missed 2 planning calls, forgot the bridal shower date, and once asked me if the ceremony and reception were at the same place while standing inside the reception venue. But Brianna looked good in photos. That mattered. I learned about the bridesmaid dresses from Instagram. Sophie posted a picture of 5 pale blue gowns hanging in a boutique dressing room. The caption said, "My girls." I stared at that caption for too long. My girls. Not my sister. Not the woman who paid the deposit. Not the person who knew the florist's emergency number, the caterer's allergy list, the photographer's timeline, and the exact size of the ballroom tables. Just the girls. When I asked Sophie about it, she sounded annoyed. "Emma, you know I love you, but I need you to coordinate. I can't have you walking down the aisle when you're the only one who knows where everything is." I said, "You mean you need me to work?" She laughed. "Don't say it like that." "How should I say it?" "You're being weird." There it was. The word they used when I noticed something I was not supposed to notice. The week before the wedding, the remaining balance emails started coming in. I forwarded all of them to my parents. Venue balance, catering balance, floral final payment, lighting upgrade, additional bar package. Mom replied with heart emojis. Dad replied, "We'll discuss after the wedding." After the wedding. That phrase made my stomach tighten. I called Daniel 2 days before the wedding, not because I wanted to create trouble, because something felt wrong. Daniel was decent. Quiet, but decent. He came from a family that talked directly, which made him look confused whenever mine smiled around problems. I asked, "Do you know how the wedding is being paid?" He paused. "Your parents are covering most of it, right?" "That's what Sophie said." I closed my eyes. "What did she say exactly?" "That your parents wanted to give her the dream wedding. She said you were helping coordinate as your gift." As my gift. $37,000 and 8 months of unpaid labor had been turned into my gift. Daniel must have heard my silence because he said, "Emma, is something wrong?" I almost told him. I should have told him. But I thought of Sophie 2 days before her wedding. I thought of my mother calling me bitter. I thought of my father saying I always made things difficult. I thought, if I speak now, I become the villain forever. So I said, "No, just checking final details." He said, "Thank you for everything you've done. Really, that almost broke me, because Daniel thanked me more sincerely than my own family had. The night before the wedding, Sophie called at 11:48 p.m. "I hate the seating chart," she said. I was already in bed with my laptop closed for the first time in 14 hours. "What's wrong with it?" "Daniel's aunt is too close to my friends. And Mom says Aunt Linda should be farther from the head table because she asks too many questions." I sat up. "Sophie, the chart is printed, so reprint it. It's midnight." She started crying. Not loud, not hysterical, just that soft, wounded crying that always made everyone rush toward her. "I just wanted one perfect day," she whispered. And there I was again, big sister, problem solver, emotional janitor. I opened my laptop. By 1:30 a.m., I had redone the seating chart, emailed the venue, printed backup copies, and steamed my dress in the bathroom while waiting for confirmation. At 4 a.m., my alarm went off. Wedding day. I looked in the mirror and barely recognized myself. Puffy eyes, pale skin, hair tied back because there was no time to curl it. Then Mom texted, "Please don't look tired in photos. This is Sophie's day." I laughed, not because it was funny, because at some point, pain becomes ridiculous. I arrived at the Everly house before sunrise. The staff was unloading linens. The florist was already angry because the arch needed to be moved 3 feet to avoid direct sun. The cake delivery was delayed. The harpist had the wrong start time. And Brianna, the maid of honor, texted me at 7:12 asking, "Do I need to bring anything?" I typed back, "Your dress." Then I deleted it and wrote, "Just be there by 10. By 8, I had fixed the arch. By 9, I had confirmed the caterer. By 10, I was pinning Sophie's veil, while Brianna filmed a behind-the-scenes video. Sophie looked stunning, truly. I hated that I noticed, but I did. My little sister looked like a magazine bride. She turned toward the mirror and said, "Do I look expensive?" Brianna laughed. I said, "You look beautiful." Sophie looked at me through the mirror. "Can you check with the venue about the champagne tower?" I was still holding pins in my mouth. "Sure." Not, "Thank you." Not, "You look nice too." Just another task. At noon, the photographer began taking family portraits before the ceremony. I was carrying a box of programs when Mom waved at me. "Emma, come here." For one hopeful second, I thought she wanted me in a photo. Then she lowered her voice and said, "Can you stand over there? You're in the background." I looked behind me. "I'm not in the shot." "You are from some angles." The photographer shifted awkwardly. Dad said, "Just move, Em." I moved. Then Sophie called, "Actually, Emma, can you hold my bouquet while we do the sister shots?" Sister shots. She meant herself with cousins and bridesmaids. I held the bouquet. My Aunt Linda saw me standing there and frowned. "Why aren't you in the pictures?" Mom answered before I could. "Emma has been running around all morning. She doesn't want to look exhausted in the album." I wanted to say, "No, you don't want me to look exhausted in the album, because then someone might ask why." Instead, I smiled. A small, professional smile. The kind I used when a client's uncle was drunk before dinner. The ceremony started at 2. I stood near the back with the venue coordinator, not with my family. From there, I watched my father walk Sophie down the aisle. He cried, real tears. He kissed her cheek and whispered something that made her smile. When I was a child, Dad used to say I was his practical girl. Sophie was his princess. I thought practical meant trusted. Now I understood it meant unpaid labor. Daniel cried when he saw her. He looked like a good man stepping into a story he did not fully understand. The vows were sweet. The guests laughed at the right times. The flowers looked perfect. The champagne tower arrived. The harpist played the correct song. The day worked because I had made it work. After the ceremony, guests moved to cocktail hour. I was near the bar checking appetizers when Sophie appeared beside me. "You didn't cry," she said. I blinked. "What?" "At the ceremony. I saw you. I was making sure the musicians got the cue." She sighed. "Sometimes I feel like you're not happy for me." I stared at her. I had spent months saving her wedding from her own decisions, and she was upset that I had not cried on schedule. I said, "Sophie, I am happy for you. I'm also exhausted." She looked me up and down. "Then maybe fix your face before the reception. People can tell." Before I could answer, Mom came over. "Girls, please. No tension today." I almost laughed again. No tension today. As if I had created it by feeling the weight of what they put on me. Then Mom took Sophie's hand and said, "Come on, sweetheart. Let's get you ready for your entrance." Sweetheart. I stood there with the clipboard in my hand while they walked away. A waiter touched my shoulder gently. "Ma'am, are you the planner?" I looked at my family disappearing through the ballroom doors. Then I said, "Apparently." The reception was beautiful. I will give myself that. The ballroom glowed with warm light. White roses climbed the centerpieces. Candles reflected in the glass chargers. The cake stood under a spotlight like a sculpture. Guests walked in gasping softly. exactly the way Sophie had wanted. My mother stood near the entrance accepting compliments. "It turned out perfectly," someone said. Mom placed a hand over her heart. "We just wanted to give Sophie the day she deserved." We, that word followed me around the room. We chose the flowers. We found the venue. We planned every detail. We wanted the best for her. But when the caterer needed a final head count, it was Emma. When the florist forgot the aisle petals, it was Emma. When the band asked where to plug in, it was Emma. When the venue needed a credit card, it was Emma. During dinner, I finally sat down at a table near the hallway with the vendors. Not the family table, not even a cousin table, the vendors. I had a plate of cold chicken and 2 bites of salad before the venue manager, Camille, came over. Camille was kind and terrifyingly organized. She had worked with me before and knew exactly who had signed what. She said quietly, "Emma, we need to discuss the bar extension." I put down my fork. "What bar extension?" "Sophie requested premium open bar until midnight." I stared at her. "She what?" Camille checked her tablet. "It was approved by your mother at 5:40. "On whose card?" Camille's face changed. That was answer enough. I stood up. "The original bar package ended at 10. Premium open bar until midnight added almost $6,000. My card was on file for authorized charges because I had paid the deposit, but I had specifically told the venue no additional charges without my written approval." Camille said, "I haven't processed it yet. That's why I'm here." I felt a sharp wave of gratitude. "Do not process anything new," I said. "Not without my signature." She nodded. "Understood." At that moment, my father appeared behind me. "What's going on?" I turned. "Did Mom approve a premium bar extension?" His face flickered. "It's a wedding, Emma. That's not an answer." He lowered his voice. "Don't embarrass us." I looked around. The band was playing softly. Guests were eating cake. Sophie and Daniel were moving from table to table, glowing. I'm not the one charging $6,000 to someone else's card. Dad's jaw tightened. "We will handle it later." "When?" His eyes hardened. "After the wedding." There it was again. After the wedding. The magical time when everyone would become honest, generous, and responsible. Then Dad said something I will never forget. "Emma, today is not about you. For once, let your sister shine. For once." I had stepped out of photos, worked since sunrise, paid deposits, fixed mistakes, sat with vendors, and still, in my father's mind, I was taking light from Sophie by refusing to be charged in the dark. I said, "If today isn't about me, stop using my money." His face went red. Before he could answer, the DJ announced speeches. Dad pointed at me. "Stay calm." Then he walked away. I stood near the hallway while my father took the microphone. He smiled at the room and lifted his glass. "Tonight, we celebrate our beautiful Sophie," he said. "Her mother and I wanted to give her a wedding that showed how deeply she is loved." People clapped. I felt something inside me twist. He continued, "Some daughters are easy to celebrate. Sophie has always brought joy into every room." A few guests laughed softly. Then he looked briefly in my direction. "Others help in quieter ways." The room did not understand the insult, but I did. I had been reduced to quiet help in a wedding I was financing. Then Sophie took the microphone. She thanked our parents. She thanked Brianna. She thanked Daniel's family. She thanked the florist by name. She did not thank me, not once. That should have been the moment I walked out, but I stayed, because I thought the worst part had already happened. I was wrong. The worst part came during the father-daughter dance. I was standing near the back of the ballroom, checking a message from Camille about the final invoice, when I heard my name. Sophie had the microphone again. She was laughing. "I also want to thank everyone who helped today," she said. "Even Emma, who has been running around like staff all day." The room laughed. Not cruelly. Not all of them. Most people thought it was a harmless joke, but my mother laughed. My father smiled. Brianna clapped one hand over her mouth, like Sophie had said something adorable. I stood in the back of the ballroom, holding the phone with the invoice message, and felt my face go warm, like staff. The strange thing was, I was not offended by staff. I respected staff. Staff were the people who made beautiful events possible, while guests pretended magic existed. What hurt was that my sister meant it as a step down. I looked at the servers moving quietly through the room. Every one of them had worked hard that night. Every one of them would be paid. I was the only staff member paying to be there. Aunt Linda appeared beside me. Her eyes were sharp. "Emma," she said, "how much of this wedding did you pay for?" I froze. "What?" She did not smile. "Don't play polite with me. I've been watching all day." Before I could answer, Camille walked in from the side entrance holding a black folder. I knew what it was before she reached me. The final invoice. She had waited until after speeches, like a professional, but the timing made it feel like fate. "Emma," she said quietly, "I'm sorry to interrupt. We need final approval before we close the account." I took the folder. At that exact moment, Daniel's father stepped nearby and said, "Everything okay?" Camille, not knowing the family politics, said, "Just the final billing approval. Ms. Reed is the cardholder and authorized signer for the event account." Daniel's father blinked. "Ms. Reed?" Aunt Linda folded her arms. Daniel walked over. "What's going on?" Then Sophie saw us. Then Mom. Then Dad. It was like watching a storm realize where the lightning had struck. Sophie hurried over, still holding the edge of her dress. "Why are we talking about bills right now?" Camille looked apologetic. "The venue requires approval for the remaining balance before the end of the night." Daniel looked at Sophie. "Why would Emma approve our wedding bill?" Sophie opened her mouth, but did not speak. Dad stepped in. "It's just a temporary arrangement." I turned toward him. "Temporary since February?" The small circle around us grew. That is how family drama works in public. No one wants to stare, but everyone hears enough to move closer. Mom whispered, "Emma, not here." I looked at her. "You had all day to choose not here." Daniel's voice was careful. "Emma, did you pay for the wedding?" I looked at him. He deserved the truth more than my family deserved protection. "I paid the deposits. Venue, florist, photographer, caterer, dress installment, and multiple balances. I was told I would be reimbursed." Daniel's face went pale. "How much?" I opened the invoice folder and looked at the spreadsheet on my phone. Before tonight's remaining balance and the bar extension, $38,920. Someone behind us gasped. Sophie whispered, "Emma, stop." I looked at her. "You told Daniel this was my gift." Daniel turned to Sophie. "You said your parents paid." Sophie's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't want you to worry." He stared at her like he had just seen a door open into a room he did not know existed. Dad said, "This is family business." Daniel's father stepped closer. "My son just married into this family. I think it concerns him." Mom looked at me with fury under her smile. "You're ruining your sister's reception." And there it was. Not, "We should have paid you." Not, "We lied." Not, "We used you." You are ruining this. I held the invoice folder against my chest. "No," I said. "I saved her reception. I'm just done paying for the lie." For a moment, nobody moved. The band kept playing because no one had told them to stop. A slow love song floated through the room while my family stood in a circle around an invoice that had finally said what I had been too afraid to say. Sophie started crying first. She looked at Daniel, not me. "I was going to tell you." I almost laughed. Everyone in my family was always going to tell the truth later, after the wedding, after the photos, after the check cleared, after I stopped asking. Daniel's voice was quiet. "When?" Sophie wiped under her eyes carefully, trying not to ruin her makeup. "After everything calmed down." I said, "After I paid the final balance." Mom snapped. "Emma," I looked at her. "What? Is that not the plan?" Dad said, "Enough." "No," I said. "Enough was when you put the venue on my card. Enough was when you called it a temporary arrangement. Enough was when Sophie called me staff in a room full of people while wearing a dress my card helped pay for." Sophie whispered, "I didn't mean it like that." Aunt Linda said, "Yes, you did." Everyone turned to her. Aunt Linda had always been the kind of woman my mother called difficult, because she did not confuse manners with silence. She looked at Sophie and said, "You meant it exactly like that. You just didn't expect the staff to have the receipt." Sophie's face crumpled. Daniel ran a hand over his jaw. "How much is left tonight?" Camille, still trapped in the most uncomfortable moment of her professional life, checked the folder. "Remaining balance is $14,300. With the requested premium bar extension, it would be $20,200. Daniel stared at Sophie. "You approved a bar extension?" Sophie looked at Mom. Mom looked at Dad. Nobody looked at me. That told Daniel enough. I said to Camille, "I do not approve the extension." Camille nodded immediately. "Understood." Mom's head snapped toward me. "Emma, people are still drinking. Then they can drink what was already paid for." Dad stepped closer. "You are making us look cheap." I looked at the chandelier above us, the roses, the champagne glasses, the 5-tier cake, the ballroom that cost more than some cars. "You are not cheap," I said. "You are expensive with other people's money." Daniel's father made a sound that might have been a cough or might have been a laugh. Dad glared at him. Then Daniel did something I did not expect. He turned to me and said, "I'm sorry. Not Sophie, not my parents. Daniel." "I didn't know," he said. "I believe you." Sophie cried harder. "Daniel, please." He looked at her, and I could see his heart breaking in real time. Not because of the money only, Because the wedding had started with a lie big enough to need a spreadsheet. Camille asked me quietly, "Do you want the current balance charged to the card on file?" The room held its breath. This was the moment they all expected me to fold, because I always had, because the flowers were already on the tables, the dinner had been eaten, the cake had been cut, the guests were watching. They believed shame would make me sign. I opened my purse and took out the printed folder I had brought that morning. I had not planned to use it, not really. Maybe part of me had carried it like a life jacket, hoping the ship would not sink. Inside were invoices, receipts, text messages, promises from my father, and screenshots from Sophie saying, "Just put it down for now. Dad will pay you back." I handed the folder to Daniel. Sophie whispered, "Why do you have that?" I looked at her. "Because I know my family." Daniel opened the folder. Dad said, "This is unnecessary." Daniel's father said, "I disagree." The final page was my repayment spreadsheet. Date, vendor, amount, promise made, payment received. The last column was almost entirely empty. Daniel looked up slowly. "Emma," he said, "has anyone paid you back anything?" I shook my head. No. That one word changed the room more than any speech could have. After that, the reception became two events happening at once. On the dance floor, guests who had not heard everything kept moving awkwardly to the music. Near the hallway, the truth stood in the circle with an invoice folder and nowhere to hide. Daniel pulled Sophie aside. His parents followed. My parents tried to follow too, but Daniel's mother turned and said, "No, let them speak." My mother looked personally insulted by the concept of boundaries. Dad turned to me. "Are you proud of yourself?" I was so tired of that question. People only asked me if I was proud when they could not ask if I was wrong. I said, "Not yet." His eyes narrowed. "What does that mean?" "It means I'm calling my bank Monday. I'm freezing any further charges, and I'm sending you a formal repayment request." Mom gasped. "Against your own parents?" I said, "You were comfortable using your own daughter." She put a hand to her chest. "We raised you better than this." Aunt Linda laughed once, apparently not quiet enough. Mom turned on her. "Stay out of this." Linda stepped closer. "I stayed out of it for years. That was my mistake." Dad lowered his voice. "Emma, if you do this, you will destroy this family." I looked towards Sophie and Daniel near the windows. She was crying. He was standing with his arms crossed, looking like a man reviewing every conversation he had misunderstood. "No," I said. "I'm just refusing to finance the performance anymore." Camille returned with a revised invoice excluding the bar extension. The remaining balance was still huge, but at least it was the wedding that had already happened, not the extras my mother tried to add under cover of celebration. Daniel came back alone. His face was pale but calm. "Camille," he said, "can the remaining balance be split?" Sophie appeared behind him. "Daniel." He did not look at her. Camille said, "Yes, if the cardholders approve." Daniel took out his wallet. "Charge half to me." My father spoke quickly. "Daniel, that isn't necessary." Daniel looked at him. "Yes, it is." Dad's mouth closed. Then Daniel looked at me. "Emma, I can't fix what they did, but I won't let you be charged for the rest tonight." I nodded. "Thank you." Sophie whispered, "This is humiliating." Daniel finally turned to her. "For who?" She looked like he had slapped her. He said, "You let your sister pay for our wedding and told me it was a gift." Sophie cried again. "I was scared you'd think my family couldn't afford it." Daniel said, "I care that you lied." The word lied landed harder than any amount of money. My mother stepped toward him. Sophie was under pressure. He looked at her. "From who?" Again, silence told the truth. Camille processed Daniel's card for half the remaining balance. Then she looked at me. I paid the other half because, legally, my card was on the account, and I was not going to punish the venue staff for my family's dishonesty. But, before signing, I wrote on the authorization line, "Final authorized payment. No further charges approved." Camille copied it and handed me the receipt. That receipt felt heavier than paper. The rest of the night fell apart slowly, not with screaming, worse, with whispers. Guests learned enough. They always do. A cousin asked me if it was true. I said, "Ask Sophie." One of Dad's co-workers stopped shaking his hand. Brianna avoided me completely. Sophie and Daniel did not do the bouquet toss. My parents did not give a farewell speech. At 10:15, I walked outside into the garden and sat on a stone bench behind the rose bushes. My feet hurt so badly I took off my shoes. Aunt Linda found me there. She handed me a glass of water. "You should have told me, she said. I looked at the ballroom windows glowing behind us. I thought if I told anyone, I'd ruin everything. She sat beside me. Honey, they handed you a broom and blamed you for the mess. That was when I started crying. Not loudly, not beautifully, just enough to finally admit the day had hurt. Linda put her arm around me and said, let it out. They made you work the wedding. They don't get to control how you leave it. The next morning, my phone looked like a crime scene. Texts from Mom, calls from Dad. One message from Sophie at 2:13 a.m. You ruined the happiest day of my life. I read it twice. Then I typed, no, I paid for it. I did not send it, not because it wasn't true, because I was done giving emotional replies to people who turned them into evidence. Instead, I sent one email to Mom, Dad, and Sophie. Subject, wedding repayment. Attached were the spreadsheet, receipts, invoices, text messages, and the final venue receipt. The total was $46,780. I wrote, this is the amount I paid or was charged for Sophie and Daniel's wedding based on promises of reimbursement. Please confirm a repayment plan within 7 days. Dad called 6 minutes later. I let it ring. Mom texted, how could you send this to your sister the morning after her wedding? I replied, the same way she let me pay for it before her wedding. Then I muted her. Sophie did not reply until the evening. Her message said, Daniel won't speak to me. For a second, I felt the old pull. Fix it. Comfort her, explain him to her, make it better. Then I remembered her laughing into the microphone, running around like staff. I put the phone down. On Monday, I called my bank and disputed the unauthorized bar extension attempt. I removed my card from all vendor files. I contacted a lawyer named Marcus Hill, who handled small business contracts and civil claims. He reviewed everything and said, your family was very comfortable putting things in writing. That almost made me laugh. They had not been careful because they had never feared me. Marcus sent a formal demand letter. That was when my father finally came to my apartment. He stood outside my door holding a check. Not the full amount. Not even close. $5,000. He said, this should calm things down. I looked at the check. Calm who down? His expression hardened. Emma, don't be impossible. I did not take it. He sighed. Your sister's marriage is already under stress because of you. There it was. Because of me. Not because Sophie lied. Not because they promised money they did not have. Not because they let Daniel walk into a marriage built on a false story. Because of me. I said, is Daniel leaving her? Dad looked away. I don't know. That answer surprised me. For the first time, he seemed less angry and more afraid. Then he said, your mother is devastated. I'm sure. She feels like you humiliated her. I looked at my father and realized he had come to ask me to care about Mom's humiliation more than my own. I said, did she feel humiliated when she told me to stay out of photos? He blinked. Did you feel humiliated when Sophie called me staff? His mouth tightened. Did anyone feel humiliated when the venue manager asked me to approve the bill because I was the one paying it? He said nothing. I pushed the check gently back toward him. I'll accept repayment through the lawyer. His face changed. You're really doing this? Yes. To your family? I opened the door wider, not to invite him in, but to show him the boundary. No, Dad, I'm doing it for myself. He left with the check. 3 weeks later, Daniel called me. I almost did not answer. When I did, his voice sounded tired. I wanted to apologize again. He said, you already did. Not enough. I sat down. He said, Sophie and I are taking some space. I closed my eyes. I'm sorry. He breathed out. I don't know what happens next, but I wanted you to know I paid your lawyer $20,000 today. I sat up. Daniel, you didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. Part of that wedding was mine. Even if I didn't know the truth, I benefited from your money. I did not know what to say. He continued, I told your parents it doesn't erase what they owe. That was the first time someone in the situation had understood the difference between helping and erasing. After we hung up, I cried in my kitchen. Not because everything was fixed, because someone had finally looked at what happened and called it wrong without asking me to make it smaller. 6 months after the wedding, I received the final payment. Not all from my parents. Not in one clean apology. Life is rarely that satisfying. Daniel paid part. My parents paid part after Marcus threatened legal action. Sophie paid a smaller amount after selling some designer bags she had posted online during her honeymoon that was not a honeymoon. With fees and interest, I did not recover every dollar, but I recovered enough. More importantly, I recovered my name. For months, I had been the difficult sister, the jealous daughter, The woman who ruined a wedding by talking about money. Then the story changed. Not because my family corrected it, because people saw enough to ask better questions. Brianna messaged me one afternoon. I didn't know you paid for everything. Sophie told us you wanted to coordinate because you liked control. I stared at that message for a long time. Then I wrote back, now you know. A cousin sent me a photo from the wedding. In the background, near the ballroom door, I was standing with the clipboard. Sophie was laughing under the chandelier. My parents were smiling at guests. I looked like staff, tired, focused, useful. I saved the photo, not because I liked it, because it reminded me what I never wanted to be again. Reed and Rowan events changed after that wedding. I changed my contracts. Family discounts disappeared. Pay later disappeared. Emergency deposits without signatures disappeared. Every client paid through proper invoices, even friends, especially friends. My business grew stronger because I stopped confusing generosity with poor boundaries. Sophie and Daniel stayed together, but not easily. I know that because Sophie told me herself almost a year later. She came to my office on a rainy Thursday with no makeup and no performance. For a moment, I saw the little sister who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. She said, I was awful to you. I waited. She looked down, not just at the wedding, before, during, always maybe. That was the first honest thing she had said in a long time. I asked, why did you do it? She wiped her face. Because everyone always said you could handle things, and I liked being the one who didn't have to. That answer hurt, because it was true. She did not ask me to forgive her. That helped. She said, Daniel made me look at every invoice, every text, every payment. I don't think I understood what I did until I saw it all together. I said, I understood while it was happening. She nodded. I know. We sat in silence. Then she said, I'm sorry I called you staff. My throat tightened. I said, you didn't call me staff. You reminded me that I was acting like unpaid staff for people who should have loved me. She cried then. I did not comfort her right away, not because I wanted to punish her, because I was learning not to rescue people from feelings they had earned. Eventually, I said, I hope you become better than that. She nodded. I'm trying. That was not a perfect ending, but it was a real one. My parents were harder. Mom still believes I embarrassed the family. Dad still says I should have handled things privately. I remind him that I tried privately for 8 months, and he ignored every invoice until the venue manager said my name out loud. We speak less now. That has been peaceful. People think losing family means loud fights and slammed doors. Sometimes it means fewer phone calls, shorter holidays, and realizing your body does not tense when a certain name appears on your screen, because it no longer does. My name is Emma Reed. I'm 30 years old. My family treated me like staff at my sister's wedding, then acted shocked when everyone learned I had paid for it. They thought love meant I would cover the bill and swallow the insult. They thought being reliable meant I would never ask for receipts. They thought if they embarrassed me in public, I would protect them in public. They were wrong. The venue manager did not ruin the wedding. The invoice did not ruin the wedding. The truth did not ruin the wedding. The wedding was already built on a lie. All the truth did was turn on the lights. And when everyone finally saw who had been standing in the back of the room, holding the clipboard, paying the deposits, saving the day, and disappearing from the photos, I stopped feeling ashamed, because I was never jealous of my sister's spotlight. I was just tired of being the electricity that kept it on.